children. Just to kind of give you an idea, the country of South Africa is around 1/8 the size of the United States by land. And in the United States, there are around 443,000 children in the foster care system compared to 5 million in South Africa. And technically, their system, in theory, it should work a little bit like ours does, where, children are taken out of bad environments or taken in when the family can't care for them and placed in a better home. But what happens with such a large amount of children, a lot of times these caseworkers just have so many piles of papers on their desks, so many cases that they have to deal with. The easiest thing for them to do is just to take that child and just to place them with the next of kin. And what that leads to is just taking them out of one bad situation and placing them in another bad situation. For example, one of the social workers was wanting to, the Bergies have had 3 children. They're now, they actually were taking them into their home because, as I'll tell you in a minute, we've just acquired land and began construction for a more proper facility, if you will, for a children's home. But while the Bergies have been down there doing church plant ministries and all these other ministries, they've been able to take a certain amount of children into their home. And one of the social workers wanted to take one of those children and place it with, I think it was an aunt or an uncle or someone like that. So the Bergies went out and checked out the place where they lived, and it was in one of the townships like you just saw, and they got the social worker and convinced her to get in the car with them and said, I want to show you where you're going to place this child. So they drove out there. They said things were on fire in the yard. There was broken glass everywhere, and the social worker refused to get out of the car. And so needless to say, she was on their side after that. But even here recently, they've had some children who the courts have been reevaluating some things and have even tried to take them and place them back with some other family members, and even put stipulations on it for the family members. They had to come visit them for so often before they would allow them to have that. And for whatever reason, it just seems that the families don't care. I don't really understand honestly why they want some of these children sometimes. And as you saw, we didn't make those stories up in the beginning of the video. Sometimes they will have these children and have no desire for them, so they cast them out into the street. They leave them to fend for themselves at very young ages, and I don't mean like elementary school, I mean infants, to fend for themselves. In severe cases, there's been just a large amount of abuse that goes on with these children, and to the extent that if they can't get rid of them in any other way, they'll just take the life of that child. In last year, South Africa went into a very strong lockdown. People were getting arrested after 9 o'clock for trying to buy baby formula and getting shot with rubber bullets, and it was pretty severe. But in the first 2 months of their lockdown last year, in April and June, the media actually reported on some of these cases, and that's something that's very rare because in this country they kind of refuse to admit that there's a problem, even though you can look at the numbers and see they kind of like to believe they have it all under control. But the media did a report, and during the first 2 months of their lockdown, they reported that 56 babies were turned into children's homes, and they also reported that 50 were found in places like sewage pipes, rubbish dumps, shallow graves, trash cans on the street, and even some of those right just a block or two away from a children's home where they could have been safely turned in. And of those 50, 32 were found deceased. So it's a very sad situation that goes on there. We see that there's very little value on life in that country. And that's sad when you can get to a point where you devalue life, but it's really sad when you can devalue the life of a child. And like I kind of told some of y'all this morning, since I've become a father myself now, I realize that there is a great, great value on the lives of these kids. They're precious and they're important, and they're precious in the sight of God. But as we took our survey trip, and as we were able to talk to some of the people there, we saw what the root cause of all of that was, and that's sin. It's all about the sin nature. It's all about the devil getting a foothold in any area that he can and influencing these children in any way that he can. Now, he's prepared us in many ways that I never would have even imagined. He would prepare me to go to South Africa. And while Maggie is an RN, while I've got some background doing building maintenance and different things like that, he's taking every part of our lives and moving us there and equipping us to minister to these kids, physically and emotionally. But it's not good enough. I could stand up here and kind of be like a commercial on TV, and tell you that, we're going to be giving these kids food and clothes and shelter and all that kind of stuff. And while all of that's good and while all of that's necessary, if we do all of that, then we're no different than any of the state-run children's homes or any of the other relief efforts that are funded by other countries. We're no different than any of that. We've got to set ourselves apart in a way. And the way that we are doing that is we've got to care for the spiritual needs of these kids. Because we can give them a little bit of hope with some food and some medicine. We can make them feel a little bit better for a time. We can give them a good place to stay and a safe place to stay. And they'll grow up, a little more normal than they would otherwise. But without Jesus Christ, that cycle's never going to break. They're just going to fall right back into the same sins, commit the same sins, and it will have really almost been for nothing, us even being there, other than just extending their lives for a little bit. The only hope that they really have is that can be found in Jesus Christ. And that's what we want to give them. Maggie and I were very blessed to grow up in the homes that we did. My father being a pastor, and Maggie growing up with good Christian parents, able to attend Christian school her whole life. And we're so thankful for that. And that's what we want to see these kids have as well. We want to see them have some loving parents that tell them about Jesus Christ at a young age, be able to give them a Christian education growing up. Lord willing, see some of these young men and women get saved, surrender to the ministry, see some young men be called to preach, go back out into some of these townships and be able to start churches and reach their people. The language there is that most people speak or at least understand English. So there's not so much of a language barrier that we have to cross over there, but there's always that cultural barrier, us coming from the United States and going into these places. But if the Lord would call some of these kids to go in there and be a little more accepted than what we would be and get the gospel out. We want to see some young men and women be called, to go out and soul win, to tell people about Jesus Christ, be able to teach them a little bit of a trade, so that they don't have to rely on, stealing and gangs and anything like that to make a living, but can make an honest living, can raise a good family, can be an influence wherever they're at, in their community or at their job. But really the strongest thing and the best thing that we can do for them is just give them the gospel. And that's what they need the most. And that's what our children here in America need the most right now, is the gospel. They're being taught anything and everything from every direction, but a lot would change in our society if they knew the gospel, if they knew Jesus Christ. And that's the only thing that's going to change anything in this country, is the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's incredible what the Lord has been doing in the last few years. Like I said, the Bergies went down there about 4 years ago and have began to establish this ministry. And last year, when we thought that everything was shutting down, everything was closing down. I mean, South Africa, the embassies shut down, the government's shut down. But the Lord allowed them to get 24 acres of property in the middle of all this that's going on worldwide. He answered probably one of the biggest prayers that we've been praying about since they were there, and that's to get this property so we can get this thing going. He gave us almost 24 acres of property. It's incredible. There's a fence line on the property that's a game park, like a predator park with the lines and everything. You can hear the lions roar at night. And so they began to develop that. There was a house on there already. There was a very nice stable that's there. In some of the areas in South Africa, that was like raising horses was a big thing. So this stable is actually nicer than a lot of houses that are there. And we'll be able to convert that into kind of like a little townhouse apartment. And so even if that wasn't enough, getting that, they were able to raise the money for a baby haven that we'll have on the property, which is kind of like a children's home, but for newborns and for infants. It will be a place where if a mother is going to give birth in the hospital and they don't want that child, that will be a place where we can take that child, because the hospital doesn't want it. The hospital doesn't want to care for it. They want to find somebody to give it over to. So it'll be a place where we can take in that child until either someone suitable is found, a family member suitable for it, or a lot of times it turns into long-term care. It's also a place where we can take, where we'll be able to take children in an emergency situation. If something's going on at home, if something's not right, or they're found and they need a quick place to go and a safe place to go, that baby haven will provide all of that as well. So the Lord has allowed us to raise the funds for that. We just this past week, the bulldozers hit the property, pushing over trees, getting everything cleared off. And I just can't tell you how much of a blessing that is to see all of this happening. And I've imagined things for the last 4 years that Brother Berge the Lord gave him a huge vision for this. And he's been explaining it to me all along, and I've imagined it, but it's just so incredible to see the hand of God work in these ways. And not just that, but with the able to start Abundant Life Baptist Church, over the last 2 months, I think he's seen almost 6 or 7 souls saved, been able to do some baptisms. I think today, he was actually doing baptisms today. It's hard to keep up. They're an 8-hour difference. So they're having church while I'm just getting, good to sleep. So, but it's just a blessing to see. In the public school system, they're allowed to go in and take an entire class period to teach, preach, do arts and crafts. There's no limit on what can be taught out of God's Word. No restrictions whatsoever. And it's been such a good thing that other principals from other schools have said, hey, can you come to our school and do a Bible club like that in our school? And so that's one reason that we're really anxious to get there, because we need workers there. We need some boots on the ground. We need some people there to get these things done. So if y'all would pray for us, we have been on deputation now for just over a year, and we're about 45% on our support. And we're really praying hard that the Lord will get us there next year. We really have a strong desire to be. We know He can do it if it's His will. We just have a really strong desire to be there next year so that we can, get in and get going and do what we can for these kids and do what we can for these people in South Africa. So if y'all would pray along with us, we would greatly appreciate that. Again, see Winston if you'd like a prayer card, or stop by our table in the back, and there's actually a little diagram of the property back there so you can see all of the facilities and everything that the Lord is doing that's going into that, and see some things that I brought over from South Africa. If you would like to sign up for our email update, we send an update out about every other month. We don't spam your email every day. So if you'd like to sign up for that, you can do that back there, or check us out on Facebook, and you can sign up on Facebook to follow our ministry. But again, the greatest thing that I could ask you to do is if you just please pray for us, and we would much appreciate it. And if I could just be an encouragement to you, just for 5 minutes, in Luke chapter number 5. This is something that the Lord really used to encourage me. Because there's been a lot of times in my life that I didn't understand what was going on. I had no idea what was around the corner. I went to Bible college, graduated from Bible college, had a desire to do something. I always thought that I would love to be in full-time ministry, but I was able to work under my dad, teaching the teen Sunday school, and that's where we met Miss Katie over there. And so it was a blessing. We loved it. I hate that we're leaving it. We enjoyed it so much. But for several years, over a decade, I would say, I had a couple different jobs, doing some things. I moved up, through my jobs and learned some different trades, that building blocks, if you will, on things. And then I got a good job working as a building maintenance engineer at a 34-story building in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. That sounds like a really cool title too, doesn't it? I was really proud of that title. What that means is that I was a handyman in a big office building. That's what that means. That means I got to work on the toilets and all the fun stuff. But you tack engineer onto anything, it sounds great. So, but the Lord taught me a lot through that. But still, in the back of my mind, I thought, Lord, this is all well and this is all good. But I prayed, what else can I do? What else can I do? Maggie graduated from nursing school. I'll tell you that she'll tell you this. She did not like pediatric nursing whatsoever. We got married right in her last semester, and when she was doing her rotation with the kids and everything, she said, I'm going to go into any part of nursing except that. I'm not going to work with kids. Well, the Lord would close one door, open another one, close one door, open another one. She ended up, that's her specialty now, is pediatrics. And so, it's amazing what the Lord does, and it's amazing the things that he does in our life. But still yet, even with all of that, you think, well, how can the Lord use me? What can the Lord do through me? Well, sometimes we have fun, we have hobbies and things like that, but we think, how can the Lord ever do anything with that? How can he ever use anything like that? In Luke chapter number 5, very quickly, when Jesus finds, he's getting ready to call some men to be his disciples, Peter, James, and John. And when he finds them, in verse number 2, we know that there's a large crowd following him. And Jesus finds them on the lake of Gennesaret. And he said, in verse number 2, it says, speaking of Jesus, he saw 2 ships standing by the lake, but the fishermen were gone out of them and were washing their nets. And we know how he entered into Simon's ship. He cast out a little bit from the land. He taught the people, he sent the people away, asked Simon to cast his net out one more time. And they brought in this great draught of fishes that broke their nets, sank their ships. You know the great miracle there. But what was fascinating to me was in verse number 2, when Jesus found these guys, they were fishermen. Now, we've sang the songs in Sunday school about Peter, James, and John in a sailboat, and I will make you fishers of men. And, we've sang, but has it ever really clicked in your mind that God called fishermen to be his disciples? Christ used fishermen to be his disciples. Now, I don't know about here in Florida, but I can tell you in North Carolina, there's one distinct thing about all fishermen. They're liars. Every last one of them. I don't know if y'all have ever told a tall fish tale or anything like that down here in Florida. I love to fish, but I've never lied about how big the fish was that I caught to my wife or anything, right? But it's amazing to me to see the process of how Christ came to these men, how he taught a multitude out of their boat, how he performed a great miracle in their life, and then how he called them to be his disciples. And it just made me think, it really made me think about all of the years gone by, about all of the different jobs that I've had. And I can take you back, I can go back to high school, to my jobs in high school, and it just looks like a set of stairs to me. How one thing built upon another. One thing was a step. This was a step. And Maggie can tell you the same thing with her nursing career. Because when we got married, we loved what we did. I loved my job. She loved her job. I can tell you, we were doing just fine for ourselves. And we really enjoyed seeing missionaries in church. We really enjoyed the Lord blessing us because we could be a blessing to missionaries and to other people. And that was just something we loved doing. And then we met the Byerlys. And this is what I never thought. And it was the last thing on my mind because we were sitting about 3 rows back. We used to sit when my dad was preaching, and we were sitting about right here. And we were listening to the Byerlys tell us about South Africa. And the Lord started speaking to our hearts. Now we thought, well, Lord, we're doing good. You've blessed us in so many ways. But we never thought that he would be answering a prayer that night. We never thought we were going to be missionaries, going to South Africa to work with these kids. That was the last thing on our mind that night. But it's just incredible to see. Because we'd spent all those years, doing what we could for the Lord, trying to serve him. But then when we began talking to Brother Byerly and him telling us about the vision God had given him, he said, I need medical people there. It's going to be hard to give the gospel out to these kids if they're dying and we can't give them proper medical treatment. He said, I want to have facilities there. I want to have a baby haven. I want to have a Christian school. We've got to have at least 6 or 7 cottages and some houses and some stables and barns for the animals that we're going to have. We're going to have giraffes. I got to have somebody that can maintain all of that and do all of that. And as me and Maggie began to look back, we saw how the Lord had brought us from way back here and had just taught us so many things through the years so that he could get honor and glory out of it. You know, I bet these fishermen thought that was the last thing that they were going to do that day was be called to be a disciple of Christ. But why this was so encouraging to me was because he performed this great miracle with these fish. But the greatest miracle, I believe, in this story is that he used these fishermen to be his disciples. And he said, "Fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men." And can I tell you something encouraging tonight? It doesn't matter. It does not matter what your job is, what your career is. It doesn't matter what your hobby is or what your talent is. It doesn't matter if you're young or middle-aged or not so middle-aged anymore. None of that matters to God. All he's looking for is someone like these men, because when he said, "Cast your net out one more time," Peter, he almost put up a little bit of an argument. He said, "We've toiled all the night and have taken nothing." But he said, "Nevertheless, at thy will, I will let down the net." And he was obedient to them. That's all we've got to be, is obedient to God. That's it. We got to let Christ in the boat with us and just be obedient to what he has for us. And none of those other things in our mind that would hold us back matter. It's just being obedient to him. He has a desire and a purpose for all of our lives. I found mine that night, and everything through the last several years of my life all clicked at one time. When you have that aha moment, when everything just kind of clicks together. And that's what I saw. But that's not just me. That's just not for me. That's for each and every one of his children. He has something for us to do. And not only does he have something, he desires to use us for his honor and glory. So if I could be an encouragement to you tonight, it would be that Christ is looking for workers. He's looking for people to get the gospel out. And he's not afraid to be creative in the way that he does it. It's not always a cut and dry cookie cutter type of mold. He can get creative with us. I can be an example of that. Going to South Africa, going from working on toilets in a high-rise building to going to South Africa to give the gospel out to kids and try to help them out, give them a good life, tell them about Jesus. If he can call me to do it, he can call you to do it. Don't be scared. That doesn't mean he's going to call you to South Africa or South America or Asia or anywhere else. We can do it right here. We can do it right here in Milton. Get the gospel out. Get the gospel out. Thank y'all so much for having us tonight. We've really enjoyed